Amazon just released how loot contribution works for bosses. Let's take a look. I'll have a link in the description to the article on the Throne Liberty website. Starting off, they do go into how contribution works, at least to some extent. Reading off, it does say contribution is earned by doing damage against the enemy and healing friendly players in battle while said enemy is active. Contribution from healing is acquired for healing players both in and out of your party when participating in guild level events such as field bosses, or world bosses in this case. So this would be a trend throughout this article. They use the word contribution without going into too great of a detail. It's pretty vague on what contribution actually is in terms of numbers. They state damage in here, they state healing, but they don't state aggro threat generation for tanks. Does that mean that tanks get the short end of the stick on this? Or did they just forget to include that? Was there some sort of translation error, etc.? Secondly, does overhealing actually count in this as well? Can you just spam heals? Can everybody just chug potions? Do potions contribute to this? They don't mention that. Thirdly, can you loophole this? Example, can your team purposely take damage from stuff, now not die because dying does reduce contribution, but take damage and have your healer heal them, padding their healing numbers to increase contribution? There's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of questions that this article raises, way more than it actually does answer, unfortunately. Moving down to the general activities and distribution rules, this is something that the players were aware of for the most part. If you tag something, the loot is yours, not anyone else's. If you belong in a party, everybody shares that loot. They did say in here that loot is distributed evenly. So if you have 5 players and 10 items drop, then each player should receive 2 items each. Now, if that number isn't accurate and there's like 6 pieces of loot or 6 players or anything like that, it'll randomize that last item. The one thing they didn't mention is if this system is random or if it's round robin. Does it go down some sort of list like the party list and hit every player once and then go back to the top and go down again for loot? Or is there a possible chance of a single player getting like 3 items? Example, you kill one thing and you have a group of 5. I get the loot because that was the first RNG kill. Let's say we kill another thing and that thing also drops 1 item. Am I skipped? Does it keep track of when I got loot, etc.? That's something that they did not go over, but this is a very minor thing, and it more so applies to, open world events or the open world abyss dungeons, things like that. Doesn't really factor too much into the important thing, such as world bosses, which we'll get into in just a moment. Now, the one everybody's been waiting for, the peaceful mode world bosses, or field bosses as they call them, and arc bosses as well. So the way this works is during a peaceful mode field boss or arc boss, all players are sorted by individual player contribution. So you being in a guild or having more guild members in this isn't going to actually impact you whatsoever. You being in a party will allow you to benefit from more contribution in terms of like healing. So that is recommended, but other players in your party doing damage is not going to translate into your contribution increasing. Secondly is the obvious, player must meet the minimum contribution. They didn't specifically state what this is, so we're going to assume that means you actually have to hit the boss at least once to be able to participate or, get that pity reward at the end that you did, try to participate in the fight. How is contribution factored into these world bosses or field bosses? Now we're going to skip the 2 types of drops and we're going to go to that third line. A single player cannot obtain more than 1 epic item from a world boss or arc boss. So that means that if you have some Giga Chad with a big credit card, bank account, they can't go into the field boss, do insane amounts of contribution, and then leave with all the loot. They will only get 1 item regardless of what they do. at most. The two different drop types, we have contribution drops and random drops. We're going to cover the random one first because it's the simplest. Random drops mean that everybody in that portal on these arc bosses, on these field bosses, world bosses, has an equal chance of getting loot. Doesn't matter how much contribution you do or don't do, everybody, same playing field on RNG on getting that random drop. The contribution drops though, this one is based off of your contribution. As they said up in the article, it's based off of damage done and healing done as far as we know. That's all they said. So unfortunately, this does kind of back up this win more theory that people have kind of had out there. The people who have spent money to boost their accounts to near 4,000 CP or higher will obviously do more contribution, which will mean they have a higher chance of getting these drops. Now, with that, these players don't need that gear because they're already max geared. They will sell that, meaning that the players who can't do the contribution will kind of be forced to buy this gear from the auction, which means they're going to be forced to spend some lucent. I know, a little bit of a conspiracy theory there, but that's kind of what they're going off of by explaining it this way. The other thing they don't mention here is how much loot does each boss drop? Is this loot scaled based off how many people are in the portal? Is it always 3? Looking at the bottom where they do give an example, it does state that, I don't know if this is just an example for example's sake or if this is exactly how it works, but they listed 2 purples for the contribution drops and then 1 purple for the random drop. Now, does that mean that every portal there is a maximum of 3 drops? Because if that is the case, we're looking at least like 70 people per portal because an entire guild can fit in one. And, you know, again, that is at least. There could be way more people in each portal, hundreds. But we were not sure exactly. They never stated a number. You're splitting 3 items between 70 players at minimum. And with a contribution system, you know, if you got some Giga Chad doing, let's say 40% contribution, that means that person has a 40% chance to get loot. And then everybody else is contending with 60% divided by what, 70 people. That's less than 1% per person. How does that work out? Now, you may be wondering like where I get this math from. Judging by the last statement here, where they showcase if your contribution was 3%, then you have a 3% chance to get loot. Now, there isn't, in my mind, at least, and not that they've clarified, way to get like infinite contribution. There is a cap. So I'm assuming the boss has like 100% total contribution people can like fight for. So as somebody's contribution goes up, other people's contribution goes down. That's just how math works. This also kind of does enforce the toxicity of the June boat eclipse meta that's been going on. If a guild can force everybody else out of like June boat, for example, and then hold all of those portals to themselves and each one drops 3 items, that means their guild can get, you know, if there are 4 portals, 3 each, 12 pieces of loot every time June boat is up that lines up with an eclipse, which you can do twice a day because it has a 12-hour cooldown. Coming down to the conflict mode bosses, this seems fair, at least in my opinion, but some of the bigger guilds on some of these servers who just dominate these, you know, the smaller guilds may not see it that way, but it works the same way except your guild is considered the player instead of each player. So your guild's effort combined is what the contribution is rolled for, and then if your guild wins that loot, then it is randomized who gets that loot from the people in your guild. I don't think this article will do what they want it to do. I think this is going to cause more frustration with people. I think it raises more questions than it answers, and I don't think this is a very good loot system in my opinion. But who am I? I'm just some random guy on the internet playing Throne and Liberty. Let me know what you guys think. Go ahead and leave it in the comments below. If you liked the video, go ahead and leave it a like. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.